And we should be good, ready to go. I'm going to turn it over to Gerry Bedard from New Hampshire DOT and Nick Altonaga from North Country Council for our first session of the day.
Good morning. Thank you, Noah. Good morning, everyone. Just checking, Noah, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. Let's see. I'm all set here, I guess. So I'm Gerry Bedard. I'm the active transportation engineer for the New Hampshire Department of Transportation in the Office of Highway Safety and Active Transportation. For those that don't know, active transportation is just human-powered transportation. And most of the time that's walking and biking, but it includes other things like micromobility and things like that. As a representative of the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, I want to share our mission, and that's serving and connecting New Hampshire through transportation. And our vision is for a safe, reliable, connected, and multimodal transportation system effectively managed by a dedicated and skilled workforce. We have 5 core priorities, and the top one being safety. And the safety priority states that we strive to eliminate fatalities, serious injuries on public roads and in our workplaces through innovation, investment, education, and partnerships. So what I'm hoping to that you take away from today's presentation, first of all, just knowing that the New Hampshire Department of Transportation now has a complete streets policy. Why we have a complete streets policy. Not all complete streets will look the same. Not everyone drives a car. The concept of target speed and complete streets are more meaningful with good planning and zoning. First, I have, just to make sure everyone's awake out there, I have a question. If you could type your answer in the chat, it'd be helpful to me. Just let me know which municipality you represent. I'll just give you all a few seconds to do that. Thank you. And while you're doing that, I'll go to the next question is, does the community you represent have its own complete streets policy? Yes, no, or not sure? You're not even sure what a complete streets policy is. I know there are quite a few in the southwest part of the state, but I can see, I'm not seeing too many in here, so thank you. All right, well, hopefully after today's presentation, some municipalities can use this as a guide to develop their own. So the New Hampshire DOT does have a complete streets policy. It can be found on our website, www.dot.nh.gov. And if you go to that website under projects, plans, and programs, and then the drop-down in that drop-down menu, you'll see plans. And when you click on that, you get, programs, you get the program page, and on the program page is complete streets. And when you click on that, you get the complete streets page, and then there's the link to our policy. And this is what our policy looks like. It's just a 4-page document. I'm not going to get in details of the policy. I'm just going to hit some of the key points. And first is the policy statement, and the policy, it basically reiterates what the New Hampshire DOT's statutory role is of planning, developing, and maintaining a state transportation network which will provide for safe and convenient movement of people and goods throughout the state by means of a system of highways, railroads, air service, mass transit, and other practicable modes of transportation. But what the policy does is now emphasize the safety of all modes in all road users, including vulnerable road users and those using public transit. This is all part of a continuing evolution for the Department of Transportation. We used to be called the New Hampshire Department of Public Works and Highways. In 1986, we became the Department of Transportation to be more inclusive of other transportation modes and not just highways, but we still had a motor vehicle focus. We weren't ignoring the safety of other road users and other modes, but we addressed their safety and comfort after we took care of the motorized vehicle users. This policy hopes to bring the safety of all modes and all road users to the forefront and not just subsequent to the motor vehicle accommodation. So why the need for a complete streets policy? This graphic appeared in the 2017-2021 New Hampshire Strategic Highway Safety Plan. It represents the history of traffic deaths in New Hampshire from 2006 to 2014. That's those darker yellow or orange lines. And the predicted number of traffic deaths at that time, 9 years ago, until 2030, based on the then target goals. Since 2017, here's what has been happening. And you can see things are not going in the right direction. Still more reasons. Here's a list of the 29 high income countries ranked according to their motor vehicle deaths per capita. And the US is by far one of the worst. And New Hampshire, although one of the safer states, is not much better when compared to deaths to other countries' rates of traffic deaths per capita. This particular chart shows motor vehicle death trends in the US. So up until 2013, the trend was going in the right direction, but since 2013, things have been going in the wrong direction. Still more reasons. All the previous slides dealt with fatalities, but as this slide says, fatalities are just the tip of the iceberg. For each death, there are 18 persons hospitalized and 400 require medical care. And for anybody that's dealt with someone they love in a car crash, they know that it can be a traumatic experience. And our last reason, this particular map of the United States appeared in the 2023 New Hampshire Pedestrian and Bicycle Plan. It showed all the states that had adopted at that time a complete streets policy. And here's New Hampshire. And like I like to say, we kind of stuck out as a sore thumb in the Northeast. So that's why we ended up adopting the policy in just this past July. So back to the policy itself, it starts with some definitions, and I guess the important one is what is a complete streets. So complete streets are roadways designed and operated to prioritize the safety, comfort, and access to destinations for all road users, including motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users. Complete streets are designed to be context sensitive. Complete streets is a type of planning process, not just a specific outcome. And complete streets will look different in a variety of contexts. What I forgot to mention in the previous slide when I was talking about the reasons, there's all the reasons was, I mean, I'm not saying complete streets will solve all those problems and fatalities, but it just hopefully points us in a better direction. So not all complete streets will look the same. That's one of the key points I mentioned earlier. And just here are some examples of attempts to make streets more complete. This is what most people think of as a complete street. I'd call this your typical complete street. This is downtown Concord. It has wide sidewalks. It has on-street parking. curb extensions at the crosswalks, seating, dining, trees, and it has a textured median. It doesn't have any specific bike lane or space for bikes, but the traffic is so slow along Main Street, it's quite comfortable to bike along the street with vehicles. Here's a rural example. This is New Hampshire Route 101 in Dublin, New Hampshire. So it's a principal east-west arterial, and this is the town of Dublin's attempt to make the section of 101 that passes through their town more accommodating to a variety of users. And here's an example from Manchester that shows a reallocation of space. This is Maple Street. It used to be a two-lane, one-way street with parking, and the city made it a one-lane roadway and added a buffered bike lane. Sometimes complete streets will be a shared street. The Dutch term for this is woonhof, I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, a living street. It's a street where cars are guests. This particular example in the photo is from Winnipeg, Canada. It's probably not the best analogy, but I like to think that think of it as a parking lot. In a parking lot, like people in cars know that there could be people walking around, and the people that are walking around from their cars to wherever they're going know that cars are driving around. So both groups are cognizant of that and are aware and are moving about safely. In a more rural context, it may just be a street with no center line or edge line. There's nothing on this particular road to indicate this is a space for cars. The other definition, which is key, is going to be target speed. But first, I have another question for you folks. I'm just wondering how many of you have heard of target speed? Have you heard of target speed? Yes, no, or maybe. If you can just type your answers in the chat, I'd appreciate it. Well, that's good to know. At least thank you. All right, so let me talk about target speed. The definition that appears in the policy. Well, first of all, target speed is a relatively new concept, even for people in the transportation industry. It started showing up just within the past 10 years. And target speed is defined as the highest operating speed at which vehicles should ideally operate on a roadway in a specific context. Roadway design should include elements that discourage speeds higher than the target speed. And before I talk about target speeds, I guess I need to talk about design speed, because that's the term we've been using for years and years. It was one of the key design criterion, and it still is. So for what design, when a highway design engineer had to design a road, let me back that up. The design speed was the speed the design engineers would use to make sure that a vehicle could safely and comfortably travel at that speed on a road. So say we had to design a road with a design speed of 40 miles an hour. An engineer would have to design the curvature of that road so that someone traveling it at that speed would not feel like they were about to fly off the road. It was often very challenging. So when an engineer was able to get a nice straight section like this, you'd think, great, phew, job well done, mission accomplished. You know, a car can easily do 40 miles an hour. The problem is they can also go much faster. So this is what target speed is trying to address. Take a look at this picture. At what speed would you drive this road? And again, if you would, just put your answers in the chat. I'll give you a couple seconds here. What speed would you drive this road if you were heading down this? All right, thank you. So all of us, me included, drive at a speed we're comfortable with. And in this particular roadway, this section of roadway is posted at 30 miles an hour, but other than that speed limit sign, nothing says 30. So if town officials or highway officials really wanted cars to go 30, they would need to add elements to the road to encourage that speed. Here's another example. This road passes through the towns of Rochester, Somersworth, and Dover. I'd say there's not much here that encourages cars to go slow, and you can see they don't. So in this case, you can see that the speed feedback sign said there was a 10-mile-an-hour difference in the speed, and some might argue, and I'm not necessarily saying they're wrong, but that a 10-mile-an-hour speed differential like this creates safety issues. In other words, more crashes because of that speed differential, and might recommend raising the posted speed limit. That's a discussion for another time, but what target speed is about is deciding what's the safe speed for this section of road and designing the road or adding elements that encourage that speed. In this particular case, I think 30 is the correct target speed. You can't see it in this photo, but there are a lot of homes on both sides of the road. And recently, there was a man who was struck and killed on this street while out walking his dog. So as an engineer, if I had a project on this road, I would have to consider some additional traffic calming elements. I say additional because just even that speed feedback sign is considered a traffic calming device in itself. I suspect that once you get past that sign, cars tend to slow down a little bit. So it might be a combination of elements. So in a residential neighborhood where the target speed would be low, you might want to add some curves like this to encourage the drivers not to drive too fast. Or if you can't modify the roadway geometry, to encourage drivers to drive the target speed, say you're stuck with kind of an existing straight road, then maybe signs or gateway treatments might show to the driver that they are entering a different section of the road where they might want to go slower. And if you have a few $1 million, you put your gateway sign in the middle of a roundabout and you'll really get some traffic calming. And here are some other examples. This is Fisherville Road, US 3 in Concord. It has a median island. It's a pedestrian refuge island where it shows to cars that there's something in the way, so that slows them down and gives pedestrians a place to stop when they cross the road halfway. This is New Hampshire Route 16 in Tamworth, or at Chicora Village. It's another major arterial, this one north-south, and it has some ornamental lights. It has curbing and sidewalk. There's some on-street parking and a textured shoulder, all kind of showing to the driver like, whoa, this is different. I have to slow down. This is Banfield Road in Portsmouth. It has a speed table. And this is another example from Dublin. There's a median in the middle of the road, which causes the traffic to have to shift a little bit, indicating to the driver, hey, something's different here, and that maybe they should slow down. And here are some more examples that can be used to encourage drivers to do the target speed. One of my favorites is the roundabout. This is a quasi roundabout, again, on Route 101 in Dublin. This is something called, I haven't seen many around here, but this is called the diagonal diverter. It controls the movement of cars, can reduce the volume of cars on the street and slow cars down. Think of it as eliminating the cut-through traffic through a residential neighborhood that everyone hates. This might create some inconvenience for the residents and would have to be coordinated with your emergency responders. That's another element of the policy I'll talk about later. but this must be weighed against safer and quieter streets. This is just another view of what a diagonal diverter would look like. So there's a lot of different traffic calming elements. So what the DOT is hoping to do is to develop a menu of these elements, of where they might be applicable and what their effectiveness is. Because obviously they all have different levels of effectiveness. A sign on the road might slow cars down, but not as much as, let's say, a roundabout. So back to the policy. After the definitions is our comments and actions, and the first item is our commitment and vision statement. The statement is based on a recognition that highways and streets that are safe for the most vulnerable road users are inherently safe for all road users. The next item is one I think is very important. It deals with access to transportation and the recognition that not all road users have access to a motor vehicle. So this is one of those takeaway points. Not everyone drives a car. This is the numbers are all over the place. It goes from 1/3 of the U.S. population don't drive to 91% of Americans of driving age don't have a driver's license. So there's no sense in arguing over the numbers. The bottom line is just to remember is not everyone drives a car. The numbers that include that say 1/3 of the population doesn't drive a car, that includes, that's the whole population. So that includes children. So some will, write it off as being, well, that doesn't make sense. It includes children. That's true, but that's only 5% of the population. And so those are the young kids that have to be carted around. But it also includes older children and teenagers who they can't drive, they can't get around, they can get around on their own. They don't have to be carted by their parents, but they can't drive. So if roads and streets aren't accommodating to those folks, they have to be chauffeured by their parents. Often when people talk about people that don't drive, in addition to the young people, they talk about the older population. However, statistics show that many seniors maintain their driver's license. And I raise this for two reasons. Just to be aware that having a driver's license does not necessarily mean the person drives, and having a driver's license does not mean you prefer to drive. Other reasons why people don't drive a car, and some of these are sometimes temporary. It might be you might have a broken arm, broken leg. Certain medications don't allow you to drive. You could have, there are vision impairments. This photo here is of Anna Zevarts. You wouldn't know it by looking at her, but she has a visual impairment known as nystagmus, which causes her eyes to shake and reduces her visual acuity so that she cannot drive. She's the executive director of the Non-Drivers Alliance. She's author of the book, When Driving is Not an Option, and she started the National Week Without Driving, which takes place at the end of September, first week of October every year. There's financial reasons you might not drive a car. Your car could be in the shop. It might be a family of 4, and it might add 4 drivers in just one car, or maybe even 2 cars. And so it is also the case where people sometimes temporarily lose their license because of driving offenses. I don't condone drinking and driving and agree with the loss of their driver's license, but it should not result in the loss of their job because they cannot get to work. And as a side note, complete streets, especially those with good public transportation, could keep restaurant goers and bar patrons from behind the wheel in the first place. So maybe there would be less DUI type of offenses. So again, now back to the policy. The policy actions 3 and 4 are very similar. The 3 is policy partnering and collaboration. This is what the department has done in developing the policy. We will continue to, and as we continue to implement the policy, and what we're doing today, reviewing it with towns and municipalities. 4 is project-specific coordination. The policy represents the New Hampshire DOT's goal to have highways and streets for all users. How we get there, project by project, will be coordinated with municipalities, abutters, and other stakeholders, including, as I referenced earlier, the emergency response personnel, and as I'll talk about a little bit later, maintenance personnel. It's a bit awkward where it appears in our policy, but the next item is under project-specific coordination is innovation. The point here is just to think of new ways to solve our traffic congestion problems. It's the opposite of doing things the way we've always done them. If we keep trying to solve our congestion problems by increasing capacity with additional lanes, we'll get something like this. This is known as America's widest highway. It's just outside of Houston. It's the Katy Freeway. It doesn't show it in this photo, but I think it has up to 26 lanes. And then even closer to home, this is an intersection in Salem, New Hampshire, and the southern leg or southern approach to this intersection has 9 lanes. So maintenance is another consideration in the policy, and maintenance of things like sidewalks, particularly winter maintenance, is often not within the realm or practicality of the New Hampshire DOT. However, the New Hampshire DOT will continue to minimize maintenance. Ways to minimize winter maintenance might include a buffer or some space between the road and the sidewalk, so all the snow plowed from the road doesn't just end up on the sidewalk. This could also be an argument for avoiding adding additional lanes to relieve traffic congestion. Any added lanes would just mean more snow plowed onto the sidewalk, which typically becomes the responsibility of the municipality to get rid of. So how have I done for takeaways? We talked about, that was an easy one. The New Hampshire DOT does have a complete streets policy. Why we have a policy. I showed you how not all complete streets are the same. Not everyone drives a car. We talked about the concept of target speed. What I haven't touched upon yet is that complete streets are more meaningful with good planning and zoning. So in this image, you can see nice residential neighborhoods, but with no meaningful destinations other than maybe a good neighbor. Complete streets become less meaningful. Not less important or desirable, but less purposeful, I should say, maybe. I suspect many of the streets in these neighborhoods could be considered complete streets. And you've seen these type of streets with basketball hoops on the street, or kids playing street hockey, or even kids riding their bikes. But are any of these streets being used for transportation other than by car? Are your planning and zoning regulations forcing people no option but to always go anywhere, to use a car to go anywhere? People seek out these neighborhoods. I mean, this is like probably a desirable neighborhood, and would not welcome a grocery store or a big box store. But how about just a few quaint corner markets that people could walk or bike to get that 1 gallon of milk and not force them in their car to do so? I recently attended a webinar on roadway safety, and the Washington State Department of Transportation presented this slide. So it stated that transportation safety starts with how we build. Land use, policies, and regulations influence how people get around and how safe those trips are. And location matters. The design of neighborhoods shapes travel choices, trip length, and mobility options. And I think that sums up a lot of how zoning and planning become important. So that's all I have. Thank you. My contact information, there'll be time for questions at the end after Nick's presentation. But if you want, you can reach out to me at my email address there at the DOT. You can also find, if you don't get this in time, you can get it off our website. So I guess back to you, Noah.
Sure. Thank you, Gerry. That was great. I'm going to turn it over next to Nick Altonaga from North Country Council, who's going to do the second part of the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Noah. I appreciate it. And thank you, Gerry, for the in-depth background on Complete Streets. My presentation's a little less comprehensive, so I appreciate Gerry's thoroughness. I am going to talk about a more local perspective for Complete Streets. So I'm Nick Altonaga, the Senior Transportation Planner at North Country Council Regional Planning Commission. I work closely with Gerry and a lot of his other colleagues on road safety projects and all sorts of things. And I also work with Gerry with the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, as I'm the chairman of that committee. And so we meet regularly to go over ideas, we discuss things going on in the state. We helped assist with the development of the Complete Streets policy that DOT ended up adopting, which is a really great development for the state. Just a lot of good feedback we had from members all over the state. But so anyways, I'm going to go into some local perspectives. It's going to be pretty simple, pretty bare bones, but I want to just kind of remind everyone of what Complete Streets are. I'll probably be repeating some things Gerry brought up, but I think it's really important, as people on the ground, at the local level, it's just things that we want to just get the word out for a lot of things. So Complete Streets are not one size fits all. To reiterate, the piece from Gerry's presentation is that Complete Streets, it considers the safety, comfort, and access and destinations for all road users, including motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, everybody. And that is also, it's a really good thing. And Gerry had brought this up in his presentation, was people of all ages and abilities. That is really a major thing to consider of just how everyone gets around our communities. Complete Streets are everywhere, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and we saw examples of that Gerry presented. This is more a reminder of just people have when Complete Streets is brought up, it can be a contentious subject, but your community does not need to adopt an official Complete Streets policy or an ordinance to build complete streets. And complete streets do not have to be perfect. They're not, with the examples in Gerry's presentation, it does not everything needs sidewalks, curbing, crossings, perfect lighting. They don't have to be perfect. We're trying to get to that goal of safety for everyone, and it will look different no matter depending on where you are. Some examples of complete streets. In general, they exist in cities, towns, villages, everything in between. I always like to point out to the towns that I work with in the North Country that our traditionally developed downtowns and village centers are complete streets. Residential, commercial, local services tied together, connected with different sidewalks, crossings, or even other pathways that are off the road. Unofficial, official, they come in all shapes and sizes. And just to say again, smaller communities can have complete streets. Just in the North Country, I can rattle off Colebrook, Lancaster, Littleton, even North Stratford Village can be considered complete streets. But I know my colleague, I think from Gorham is here. Gorham has a walkable town center that has different features in different parts of it. And so they come in all shapes and sizes and views, and, they are in your community, just have to look and, kind of think about those things. And just some examples this is downtown Lancaster. It has a population of about 3,000 people. It has, the downtown strip, which is the traditionally developed town center. It does have crossings, sidewalk, lighting, all those things. But it also has sidewalks that then lead up to quieter residential neighborhoods just off the main road. So it's easy to get to if you're living even within a half a mile, it's pretty safe to get down there. And also the same thing with downtown Littleton, population of only 6,000, a similarly developed town center. And they have done a lot of work. Some of the features that Gerry mentioned, the traffic calming, they have made a big push in the past 15 years to try and incorporate those into their town center with the expanded curb, new signage, things like that. But like I said, North Stratford Village. So Stratford is a town of about 662 people. And I've worked closely with them on plans to revamp their North Stratford Village. So this area has housing immediately in the area, but it also has the town school, it has the town offices, it has some commercial development up by the intersection with US 3 and then going across the river to Vermont. So they really come in all shapes and sizes. It is they're everywhere. And there are different ways to handle it depending on where you're at. North Stratford will not handle their problem the same way as Littleton or Lancaster or Concord. These are very different communities, and you have to, context really matters, and you need to, look at different solutions for different problems. And so there are different ways to test out complete streets. There's not just put in permanent infrastructure, build it out, spend the $2 million on a roundabout, like Gerry had mentioned. There are different steps you can go through. You don't need a plan. You don't need a policy. You can go a more, local route, which is consider developing a downtown action plan or a neighborhood action plan where you engage the public on a specific, neighborhood or area to put forth some, a clear path and achievable strategies. That might come with permanent infrastructure recommendations, put it on your capital plan, things like that. Or it could be a thing of thinking about different lighting or roadway markings. It can be that simple that those could be your path forward for safety. Conducting a walk audit. AARP has some great resources for conducting a walk audit, which those are basically you gather, it could be local officials, it could be volunteers from the community, but you would observe and evaluate the walkability and safety of a given location or area. If you're downtown, if you're at, a certain problematic, intersection, things like that, it's a great way to get out there and really see the problem and then try and develop maybe some solutions that could go into an action plan or become an infrastructure project, things like that. There's also just in general conducting a traffic study using traffic counters. I know at the regional level, we regularly every season get requests from towns to do local locations, and these are great ways to collect concrete data about the situation in a given area at a given street or development. And that helps you make the decision of, does this warrant a bigger picture solution? Does this need that permanent infrastructure? Does this need, what level of need is it at? And there's also, and we have some experience with this in the North Country, is conducting what's called a traffic calming pop-up demonstration, which this is using temporary supplies to change the layout of a street or intersection to kind of test out, you give a test run to a new design. We recently did one in the town of Jackson, teeing off a intersection that had an island, and so they were concerned about speeds and things. So it was able to slow speed and give an idea of how much space the town could use for green space and landscaping and things like that. And just to back up kind of some of the things I just talked about is that so AARP has their walk audit toolkit, and I highly recommend taking a look at what AARP has. They have done a lot of work in the past, I think 10 or 15 years on livable communities, walkability, age-friendly communities. That's their flagship. But I highly recommend that to look into because they are very helpful resources and for free. We also have conducted, as I have some pictures here of the left picture is a pop-up we did in 2021 in Whitefield. pretty simple, but we were able to increase visibility of different crossings. We, put the pedestrian crossing signs out, some planters. Um, and then the road closed sign was from the town of Jackson, where we closed off an entire section of road um, to basically funnel traffic in a safer way to slow speeds down and to create green space that the community could use. Um, and then I have a little screenshot of the town of Millinocket, Maine downtown action plan. They recently did one about 5 or 10 years ago. Um, there's a lot you can do that does not come to the level of needing a policy. It comes to that, what you really want to do is as a community come together and develop, the solutions that work for you. And it is all about that, the drive to consider the safety of all users. So it's not just how many cars can we get through as quickly as possible. That's not the goal here. It's, you can build complete streets just by bringing in these conversations of, well, how do people walk from, their house to the grocery store? Can you do that? Is it safe? Is it possible? They have to play Frogger to get across the street. Even bringing that into the conversation, leads you to complete streets. It's a goal, but it's a bit of a moving target. Um, some considerations when you're considering, complete streets for your community is funding. What funding sources are out there that can be used to support a possible bigger project? Designs. Will the town need more in-depth engineering or other designs for your project or your idea? Approvals. What review, permitting, and other approvals are needed to move a solution forward? And this also is important to consider, really highlighting this, is that DOT is there to help, especially if you're dealing with a state right-of-way, is that you want to get with them and talk about options. And they're happy to throw things out and maybe schedule a site visit. They're really, good for that. And the next piece is coordination, and kind of jump the gun on that. But it's really good to consider who else needs to be involved. Have you contacted DOT, other agencies, the county, any stakeholders, and implementation? What will the result look like? Will the possible solution be permanent or seasonal? For example, you could have, permanent curb extensions, the concrete, everything, and curb and gutter. Or are you using, posts you can bolt down in the summer months with traffic posts and traffic cones and things like that? With, maybe you just improve striping and then it's a seasonal change. Um, these are all really good things that that are really important for the towns to think about when they're talking about their complete streets projects. And so how can you build complete streets in your community? The first one, use proven safety countermeasures. A lot of what Gerry mentioned for examples of traffic calming are proven safety countermeasures. There's a lot of resources from the federal level on these measures. There are roundabouts, there's lane striping, lighting. They have it's basically a comprehensive manual of things that might work in more rural areas, more urban areas. And so it's exciting that DOT is contemplating doing one specifically talking about New Hampshire, which would be great. Considering lighting and pavement marking upgrades, install signage along roads and at intersections. And just to really highlight this is that there's a lot of resources out there. And so use pre-existing guides and resources. Federal highways, New Hampshire DOT, other state DOTs might have some ideas. Regional planning commissions like North Country or throughout the state. And other groups, Smart Growth Alliance, AARP, the Safe Routes Partnership, they all have a lot of really good information on complete streets and different ways to get it done. And so here's some pictures of different manuals. Montana has a lot of information on traffic calming and doing those pop-ups I mentioned. The Small Town and Rural Multimodal Networks Guide presents a lot of interesting, more local road redesigns, restriping, things like that, that the town might use as a low-cost way to improve safety. There's best practices manuals out there. This one I screen capped is from Southern Georgia. Like I said, the proven safety countermeasures for rural communities. And North Country Council, we last year developed kind of a big primer on the complete streets policy planning process. of what goes into it. It has a lot of the information I kind of have mentioned here. It has a template language for resolutions or ordinances. We have a lot of resources in there. And so this is a thing that you really want to lean on at the local level, because there's a lot to consider when you're upgrading your infrastructure, or maybe if, considering what your options are. So I appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Well, thank you both, Gerry and Nick, for two very informative presentations. We have about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes for questions. I'm not seeing any yet in the chat, so I'll give folks a minute or two to kind of formulate any questions folks may have. Maybe I'll throw out a question or two to you guys while folks are formulating their questions. So I guess it's probably more for Nick. It could be for Gerry too. Nick, if anybody watching today, kind of wants to is intrigued by this idea of complete streets, kind of where would be kind of the first place you would suggest kind of starting? Say they have a street, kind of as Gerry said, that doesn't have any complete street features right now. They kind of want to test out the idea. They want to gain support. What would kind of you say should be kind of the first step that they should kind of consider?
I think, I think really considering is at the local level, doing a walk audit or thinking about, getting the community involved to talk about it is really important. That's low cost. That's, and so that is the thing, is that you can test these things out like with a pop-up. That takes a little bit more planning, but there's resources for that are the regional planning commissions. In our region, we actually procured about $15,000 of different traffic calming equipment, flower planters and road bollards and barricades, to, if a town wants to do one of these, we can help them set it up for no cost, basically, for the community. And to help other regions to do it, we're going to be assisting the town of Sunapee with one of these and bring our equipment down.
Great.
So
great, awesome. Gerry, do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
No, it's just what Nick's, and it depends on, I was going to say, it depends on the jurisdiction of the road. But even
Sure.
if it's a state road, you still generally start with your local town officials, because it's better to have it come to the DOT from the town official, local town official, or like Nick said, the regional planning agencies. So, and that's, I mentioned we'll have a website, which we're going to hopefully grow and get ideas there as well, so people can go there and then go back to their town official and coordinate efforts that way.
Great. So we are starting to see some questions come in, which is great. Apologies for looking on my other screen for the question. The first question is from Stephanie. Would complete streets be a part of a capital improvements program plan, a CIP plan, or is this something that needs to be adopted by the select board?
So it could be, it could be I kind of think of complete streets as a spectrum, because you could do a concrete, we have a plan, we have a policy officially adopted. But at base, it could just be in your CIP, you could say, oh, we want to do a streetscape project that includes the traffic calming features. And so it's an unofficial way to get there. So you're including these complete streets elements, but you're not strictly, you're not tied to some policy that you have to redo your zoning or your subdivision ordinances and things like that. So yes, I have the town of Jackson, after we did that pop-up, they're putting that idea on their CIP coming up. So
it's good for that when a town has the policy, because if nothing else, it kind of raises the flag, for some of the smaller towns that oftentimes the road that goes through the middle of town is a state highway. If the town has a policy, at least someone could say, oh, what, at least it makes them bring their attention to, like, oh, okay, wait, we have a complete streets policy. What can this project, what can we do along this project to help encourage walking and biking and other mobility choices. That happened to a project in I think it was Alstead, where like the town officials said, hey, we have a complete streets policy, and it just made all the design people think, okay, what can we do to help accommodate walking and biking? In that particular case, it was just trying to find ways to make sure the traffic stayed at a relatively slower speed. Like Nick said, it looks different in different things. So that's one of the ways that a policy can help, even if it's not in a capital improvement program. So
great. Another question from Lori. First, she said, in rural communities, there's little or no funding. What are some ways to convince the public of the need for complete streets?
So I did see that comment come in, and funding really for me is vital. I mean, it's tight across the state, and rural communities are, I help the whole northern third of the state, and we've got the town of Albany, which is about 700 or 800 people, and they've got New Hampshire 16 running through with 10 to 15,000 cars a day. And they're ripping their hair out trying to find what to do with it because they don't have the budget for it. But there are options, and DOT has been good in trying to. They have their regular paving preservation program every year. They have different projects come up, and so they've been really good working with us and towns that if you have, it's really good to keep a list of, what projects are important in your town, because DOT has said, if you have a project that aligns with our paving program, we can incorporate that. And that's no cost to the town. It's incorporated into, maybe it won't be building a roundabout, but it might be fixing that corner, adding in a crossing, these. And so that is a big thing that DOT has been trying to communicate to the towns about, that, they want to help and they understand that budgets are tight. And I think, to your second point, is that complete streets are all about safety. When someone, as Gerry mentioned, like, oh, this stretch of road, someone was struck and killed walking their dog. Is that's what complete streets is about, is that it's about safety front and center. It's just about what works the best in your town. And it's, trying to say, especially with, up to 30% of the country does not drive. And so we really need to consider options for everybody. And, we're at the BEA OPD conference right now. And so complete streets, walkability, placemaking, these are terms that are both safe for road users of any kind, but also they're attractive for investment. They're these ideas of, building this good infrastructure, accessible infrastructure, are helpful for businesses, for services, amenities, things like that. They're, help people get safely to and from places. So they're economically attractive, and help build up, they have that extra benefit of, making a sense of place, building your community character up and things like that. Which, Gerry, you can probably add to that, but.
yeah. So I did want to mention, so Nick mentioned our resurfacing projects. So those are, we call them preservation projects. So basically we can do things, but not often huge things. It's from, when we're preserving what's there. So it's edge of pavement to edge of pavement. So we're not going to widen the shoulder on a preservation project. However, it's a good opportunity to maybe restripe the lanes narrower, or like Nick said, maybe you put a crossing in. We just had a pavement preservation project in the town of Hopkinton where we removed a lot of pavement. We tightened up a right turn lane to make the road safer. So yeah, that's a great time. And if towns can keep a list of things they want to do, it's good to know. And we've been talking about this with our Complete Streets Advisory Committees, making sure that towns are aware of our paving schedule so that they go, hey, in 3 years, we're going to repave this road. Maybe that's a good time to do something, put a crossing or restripe it to narrower lanes. There was one other thing I was just going to mention. Yeah, it's escaped me. So if I come think of it, I'll go back to it. Oh, I know what it was. It was so the question was, what are some ways to convince the public of the need for complete streets? That's something we always talk about in our complete streets committee. If we had enough money, we'd send everyone to Europe and see what it's like in some of the European towns that you can walk and bike and get around very easily. Another thing, I'm almost sad to say this, but our current gas price situation, that's making people think about not always getting in their car. I wish it wasn't the case. And there's a lot of arguments about getting prices lower. And I'm like, part of me thinks, no, let's keep them high because that's going to get people walking and biking and out more. The U.S. is still one of the lower countries in the world for gas prices, but it's hard. That's what we're always looking for, ideas of how to get people out of that mindset of just cars and value those complete streets. And like I said, I think once they get to experience it, people go to Europe on vacation and they go, oh, it was great. We could walk and bike everywhere. Then they come home in the United States, and for some reason, it leaves their mind. They don't think about it. Hey, I could try to do this in my own community. So,
yeah, I think just to add on, I think that's a great point, Gerry. And you bring that up regularly, is at Complete Streets and in our conversations, is yeah. But at the functional level, so what I've done, and this is about projects and working with DOT, is that I've developed a one would say too big list of our regional projects. So I took all the official 10-year plan funded or upcoming projects, put them in a spreadsheet. I then added in all of our other known about projects. I reached out to towns asking about safety concerns. I have, I think, 150 on a spreadsheet to basically say to towns, hey, let's check in regularly, make sure this is still a priority. And then when the time comes, can work with DOT or the town and say, oh, well, that's coming up. Let's get that, on everyone's mind. So really, I think talking with your planning commission is really helpful, not just to pump my chest up here, but they can be really helpful to keep some of that data for you, because you're dealing with day-to-day different committees, boards, work at the local level. So they can help fill that role of helping kind of shepherd these things and check in and coordinate with DOT to try and make little by little progress and take whatever opportunities you can. I know for me, as I send out any grant that might help the towns whenever possible, I send it to our transportation groups and I send it out in our newsletters and things. And it's just trying to find those different ways to help out. Is the RPC is really there to help towns. And so we try and do it as best we can. We know that everyone's stretched thin and there's not a lot of funding. So we try and bridge that gap whenever we can.
And like Nick said in his presentation, and he's done a great job up there in the north, it's those demonstration projects. If you can kind of give people a low cost taste of what it might be like to change a traffic pattern. But you got to be cautious. You got to be careful with that, because as Nick knows, that demonstration project, it's a demonstration project. It's done on the cheap. It's done with as inexpensively as possible. The problem is what happens if doesn't look right. People go, I don't want that. I mean, you have to be careful that the demonstration project still looks good. I know the city of Portsmouth did a demonstration project for a small roundabout, and they created it with a lot of like pylons and things like that. And if you look down the road, all you saw was orange pylons, and it was like disgusting. So you just have to be careful about those demonstration projects. And lastly, when Commissioner Lang mentioned attracting people to the state of New Hampshire, her comments went right to, well, we don't have a sales tax, we don't have an income tax. Well, we already have this beautiful state, so that should be an attraction to come to people to come and start a business here. But wouldn't it be nice if we could add that we have nice, friendly, walkable and bikeable communities as well? I don't know what the value of that is. I would love to know, and if we could put a value on that, that might help encourage more complete streets as well.
Great. Well, it's been a great conversation. We have about 5 minutes left for this session. So if folks have any kind of final questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm also going to include one resource. I know I've mentioned it to Gerry and Nick. It may have been in the resources that I mentioned, but the story map of all the different kind of examples of complete streets in New Hampshire. And there's some good examples of different policies. That's continues to be updated, I believe, at least as of this March. So I encourage folks to check that out as well.
I keep a lot of resource links and things, and I can probably send them to Noah. So, when they send out information, I think it could be included, because I do, just so you don't have to do legwork if you want more information on complete streets. I keep a lot of links for those countermeasures, for the policies, for the, all those organizations I mentioned. I can send them a list, so then you have that ready to go.
Great.
Because it is hard to do the search sometimes. It can be a lot to find what you need. But I'll yeah.
Great. Well, I am not seeing any other questions in the chat, so I'm going to let people, unless you, Gerry and Nick, have any parting words. I want to thank you for a great presentation. We will resume our next presentation at 10:30 on regulatory reform opportunities and challenges. So everybody go take a break, grab coffee or whatever, and we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate being able to present today. So
Thank
have
you.
a great day.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Gerry.